I'm Dr. John Gartner.
And I'm Dr. Harry Segal.
And welcome to this preview of Shrinking Trump.
Our show has been on now for almost 5 months. And what we've been doing is looking at the ways in which Donald Trump has been evidencing signs of early onset dementia, which is shown in his speech, in his gait, and the ways in which he speaks in a disorganized way. And this is all sitting on top of a pretty severe personality disorder called malignant narcissism. So in this week's show, we'll be talking about that, but we'll also be having a very special feature. John?
Yes, I'm very excited that we're going to be interviewing Dan Partland, who's the director of the new film that just came out, #Untruth. Some of you probably saw the earlier film, #Unfit, that was actually, as I say, longlisted for the Oscars. And that was about the psychology of Donald Trump and about his malignant narcissism. What Dan wanted to do in this next film is learn more about the psychology of Trumpism. And he's analyzing the mass movement of MAGA from a psychological, sociological, and lots of other different points of view. So we're going to be talking to Dan and seeing some clips from the film.
For this film, the effort was really to not so much speak about Trump and his psychology, but what is obviously the bigger issue, which is what is going on in the culture. Why, there have always been guys like Trump. The question is, why was the ground soft now, fertile now, for someone like him to take root? And I think that's a bigger, more complicated question. We spent a long time tracking down a lot of different directions and trying to provide a lot of different insights. But the whole time you're sort of trying to, you're trying to make a film that is going to be pertinent to the moment that you're releasing it into, which we knew would be in the run-up to the election, without knowing exactly what that, films are not like TV, where you make the show during the day, cable news, you make the show,
right.
Prep the show during the day and you put it on at night. You're making it months and years in advance to present it into an environment where you're not really sure what's going to be going on. And that really forces you to take a bigger view, which is what we wanted to provide. People are getting fed plenty of news. I know I am, too much. But what are we getting for it? And so the effort with Untruth was to try to take a step back and provide a larger context maybe about what was going on.
A lot of people don't know this, but #Unfit, I mean, it was a big commercial success, actually. And I like to say it was long listed for the Oscars because it didn't get nominated. And it also wasn't on most of the short lists. But there were a few critics who put on there. So I think it was at LA Weekly or the LA Times who listed it as tied for numbers 2. So it really was, people were hungry, right, to understand the psychology of Donald Trump. There was this incredible demand in the culture for that, and you met that with that film. But I think what motivated you then to do the sequel is now there's an equally strong demand to understand Trumpism, right? To understand this mass movement. That's the mass movement now that you're really trying to explain in the new film. Am I right?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, Unfit was it was both a critical success and a commercial success. And I think you're right. It's because it was hitting a sweet spot where people were hungry for a little different kind of information. We can't just keep beating ourselves over the head with the crisis of the day. And in terms of making people, it made a lot of people's top lists. I think, there's something very important as a filmmaker when you're making a doc like this, is that you're really, I think the films that rightfully get recognized on top 10 lists are for the artistry, for the craftsmanship. I think these films are very well crafted, but absolutely the content was so important. It was not, my effort was to make something ultimately that would communicate. Right. It was not to express my artistic whatever. And you really have to subvert some of your art. There are all kinds of things that I would have liked to do. And it's like that, we want to hit the sweet spot. We want to reach people. We don't want to distract them with style or form that is not sort of appropriate. And so the film's very, they're sort of down the middle stylistically. Yeah.
Well, why don't we see an example? A picture's worth 1,000 words. Let's see an example of your artistry. Here's a clip from the film.
Our generation has really lived through 2 pandemics. One, of course, is COVID-19, but the other is a psychiatric pandemic. I call it a pandemic of mass delusion. And I would argue that actually the second one is more dangerous. This pandemic has the potential to bring down our entire society. This is probably the most important psychological phenomena that's occurred in our century, in this lifetime, since World War II. And yet, if you look at the scientific literature, there's really not that much literature about it. That as a profession and as a society, we really have been unprepared for this moment.
We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
I had actually predicted that Trump would not leave office peacefully. Because he is a malignant narcissist, he is someone who would rather burn the country down than hand it over to the next man. The nature of malignant narcissism is they actually take a certain glee and pleasure in destroying things. If they can't dominate and control them, they want to destroy them. And the dark side of humanity can actually be called forth by the malignant narcissist. That the malignant narcissist kind of gives permission for people to release the most negative and destructive, most evil, most primitive aspects of themselves. Malignant normality is what happens when you have a malignantly narcissistic leader. The malignantly narcissistic leader has crazy, destructive ideas that would be seen as crazy by anybody.
We will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country.
But once they're able to capture a society or a subset of society, they are then able to make those crazy beliefs become the new orthodoxy, the new conventional wisdom.
I'm telling you, if pins cave, we're gonna drag through the streets. You politicians are gonna get drugged through the streets.
If you lived in Soviet Russia, or Mao's China, or Hitler's Germany, or Rwanda, or Yugoslavia, then you know what it's like to have your neighbors become infected by an idea or an ideology that causes them to come to your house and want to kill you.
Hang Mike Pence! Hang Mike Pence!
They feel a sense of entitlement to dominate others. They feel entitled to that, and they feel entitled to use violence or any means necessary to make that happen. And I think that Trump, he activated them.
John, couldn't have said it better yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't need the middleman. I should just be interviewing myself. You guys, can you just get off the screen?
Listen, I love that sequence. It's a real premise idea for the film, and I think a really, really important observation, and sort of where it was the launching off point is how do we understand this moment, and why were we unprepared for it? And I'm very concerned, I would look at how we teach history. I mean, I think all of us, I think there's a background question in modern people's minds, American people's minds, growing up about these horrors that you've learned about in history, right? Whether it was the slave trade or Jim Crow or Nazi Germany, and how did it happen that so many people were on board with these things?
Yeah.
And we all like to sort of test our imagination about whether it's possible that we could be consumed in this, and of course we were assured that we would be on the side of right. But at the same time that you can't get out of your own framework, and we don't know what atrocities we may be participating in right now that are invisible to us in the way that slavery or the Jim Crow South or whatever was to many people in those eras. We don't know. Maybe we would have been alive and we would have been the resistance, right? Authoritarianism is a latent trait in all of us, and that it can be brought forward. It can be activated by the right circumstances.
That's a pretty great clip. So if you want to see more from the film and more of our discussion, make sure to see this week's show. You can find it on the Really American Network, or you can search for it in any search engine. Just look for Shrinking Trump. John?
Yeah, and if you want to see #Untruth, it now streams on basically every streaming platform, and I would really strongly urge you to watch it. Thanks for watching. we'll see you on the show.
See you on the show.